Good evening and welcome to the Sound Off Show. I got a little preoccupied there, but I'm glad you're sitting where you are and that you're here to watch the show tonight. I have a great guest for you tonight, one of the smartest people around, and someone I respect greatly, one of our state senators, Mr. Randy Brock. And thank you, Randy, for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you, Linda, for having me.
You're the masked man, the Lone Ranger.
Well, I'm practicing what I preach.
Okay, I do too, but I feel like I'm separate from you, so I feel...
Well, your air over there is different than the air where I'm sitting.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'll buy it. Okay. So, welcome to the show, and
Thank you.
I haven't had you on that many times, but I'm always happy when I do, because you pay attention to what's happening in the state, and as you should, and as we all should, folks, by the way, and you're a great one to have to pose questions to and to hear from. So with that, do you want to start by addressing the folks at all, or should I just...
Sure, I can just start by saying that obviously we're back legislating again, and we're back legislating remotely. I spend every day, it seems, from about 7:30 in the morning, depending upon what's going on Zoom calls, and I'm still not convinced that you can't catch COVID from a Zoom call, but we're on Zoom calls all day long until I think I ended my Zoom calls today at a little before 5 o'clock.
Oh, my goodness.
And, it's one after another. There are committee meetings, there are party caucuses, today we had a caucus of the whole on the Budget Adjustment Act, which has a ton of money in it, talking about spending. I had a Finance Committee meeting, an Economic Development Committee meeting, and then, a variety of phone calls. And, of course, constituents call, all right, and it's dealing with those, too. So it takes a lot of time when we're in session, but most of the time it's a lot of fun, too.
Well, yes, and it encourages me to hear you say, Randy, that citizens call and have questions or want to, complain or get information or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I always have the feeling that not enough people in the public pay attention. People are sidetracked by raising families and dealing with COVID and trying to perhaps hold down employment. There are a lot of challenges right now that we all face, some people more than others. Yeah. And so it makes me feel good to know that people are reaching out. People are reaching out, and
the best way, frankly, to reach out is through email because it's faster and you can get an answer back by email in writing. Sometimes it's easier for people, but, lately the things that I've been hearing about, obviously concerns about unemployment, our benefits continuing in the same way, what's going on with federal funds that we might get. And we don't necessarily know all the answers, but what we can do in most cases is point people to here's where you could find the answer to the question that you've got. And a lot of our state agencies have done a really good job over the past year, particularly during this pandemic, of putting information out on a website that you can actually read and understand and that answers most of the questions. It's true. We've tried with the administration to be very clear that here are the questions that people are asking. So put the answers out so that people can find them easily and understand them.
Is there a particular site that people should go to?
Well, it depends. If it's a Labor Department question, which is things like unemployment and so on, you go to the Vermont Department of Labor. And, you could Google it and it'll take you right there. Questions about economic benefits, about benefits for business, what may be available for business, what may be available for individuals, what may be available for nonprofits. The site of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, ACCD, is a place that has a very good website that points you right down the line to where you can get answers to questions about, here are things that affect individuals, here are things that affect businesses in this COVID environment. The health department has a great website, and in fact, you can sign up with the health department and get an update every single day about where COVID stands. COVID stands not just statewide, but in your county and indeed in your community. The data out there is very, very interesting.
Well, that's good.
You can sign up for, and I think many people have, you can see, for vaccinations. We had something like, I think it's 37,000 people, 75 or older, 37,000 people in that age group who were eligible for the vaccine. And thus far, about 32,000 of them
Really?
have signed up. And gotten appointments. All those appointments you can get online. And again, it's marvelous. We're doing so much better than so many other states in that regard. And we have either the lowest or second lowest COVID rate of any state in the nation per capita, and the lowest death rate of any state in the nation per capita.
Right.
And I think that's really impressive performance. And I give a lot of credit to the Department of Health and to the governor for the work they've done to give us such great results.
Well, it's encouraging to hear that we have positive results, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're not there yet. Some of our rates, depending upon where we are in Vermont, are actually still increasing a little. We're not out of the woods yet, and until we can get everybody vaccinated, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, I will say that I'm happy to see that some of the schools are open. I don't know if they're open 5 days a week, but we hear so much about children being depressed and sad and lonely and not learning, not challenged.
Well, the guidance that we're seeing does say, by and large, it's safe to open schools, but you've got to be on the watch, and if you see something happening that's not going the right direction, to be able to change quickly. And we've proved ourselves to be very adept at making changes quickly if necessary.
That's good. Our children need that.
Yeah.
They really do.
Well, our parents also, there's this whole issue of so many people have had to take off from work at various points in time because of things being closed because of COVID. Yes. And we'd certainly like to see that open up. But the key is just opening things up rationally and opening them up in a way that makes sense so that we don't make a bad situation worse.
Right, and there are never, when it comes to health care and viruses and so forth, you can never be 100% correct.
You can't.
Because there are so many moving factors.
Well, there are, but the guidance, what we've done in Vermont is we've followed the science and we've followed the health department recommendations, and we've done so pretty religiously, and it's worked for us. Well,
that's great. That's a positive.
It's a positive, yeah.
I'm shifting gears here.
Sure.
Prop 9, that is the amendment to the Vermont Constitution. I'm not sure whether it actually happened or not. I want to know it. That's the one that would establish that the state of Vermont would own or control all of the natural resources in the state.
Yeah.
Even on private property.
Well, it's essentially, it's a right, if you will, to clean air and water and so on and so forth. And it has lots of implications to it that I really question. Because just as you say, depending upon how you interpret some of that language, it could in effect give the state the right to have to impose a variety of controls on private property that I think most of us would consider to be wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, does that include my well that I paid $5,000 to have drilled?
Well, it's public water, right?
No, it isn't. It's
okay.
mine.
In that case, it's yours.
It's on my land.
But that's my point, is the interpretation of that, I think, could be very problematic. And I certainly don't support it. It's not come up for a vote. I don't know if it will come up, frankly. I just don't know. What
I see, Randy, that's extremely disturbing to me in general is government trying to control so many aspects of our lives. when it comes to TCI. All right? If you want to buy an electric vehicle, God bless you, go and buy it. But don't tax me for it. I'm trying to pay my own bills, all right?
Well, one of the things that we do need to do about electric vehicles, and this is a very important thing, is we've got to figure out how to tax them. Because if you're paying for your fossil fuel-fired vehicle, you're paying the taxes on the fuel. The fuel that powers electric vehicles from the individual, that needs to be taxed too, so that we have some equity in terms of who's paying for maintaining our roads and our highways, because they're both using them.
Well, who is paying, let's say you have an electric vehicle and you have to charge it. So you go to a charging station along the highway or wherever it happens to be that we also had to pay to have installed, even though we're not interested in an electric car or electric whatever. We shouldn't have to pay for that.
Well, right now, that's one of the things that we need some legislation to clarify. We need legislation so that we know who's paying for what, and I think it's not just paying for it, but also it's the tax on it that will be used to maintain the roads and highways and bridges that we are collecting from the owners of gasoline-powered cars.
I agree. I understand that. In fact, I've noticed in the last week that gasoline is up to $2.55 a gallon now. I remember when it was 99 cents for a while. A few years back.
Well, if you want to talk about our ages, I remember when it was 20 cents a gallon. That's
You're
how old I am.
Come on.
I'm serious. I'm serious.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I guess I wasn't driving in those days. But the tax, everything seems to be taxed. And there's a lot
Of course, you only got 3 miles to the gallon then, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I don't want to see gasoline go away. I don't want to see propane go away. If somebody else wants to have the wind and the sunshine, whatever.
Well, I think the trend that you see, and I think this is a trend that you see nationally, and I think you'll see around the world, is that there is pressure to reduce the amount of fossil fuels because it does contribute to global warming. It ultimately does. It's it's gradual, and so on, and you can say it doesn't exist, but the scientific evidence says that it does. And the question is,
whose scientific
well, it's
evidence?
not, nobody's inventing the science. Oh, I won't say nobody. A few people are inventing science,
Yes,
but that's
they
what
are.
science tells us. And so ultimately, of course, is we in Vermont are not going to control global warming by raising the price that we charge for gasoline, because we have such an infinitesimal slice of the pie that we've got to look at what's happening elsewhere in the country and what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Vermont has, I believe, the second lowest carbon output in the nation.
That's correct.
So why are we...
And we had an even lower one when Vermont Yankee was running, if you remember.
Well, yes, that was one of the biggest mistakes that have been made in this state.
Yeah, well, I guess, one of the arguments, and it's been talked about back and forth around the country, of there are new kinds of nuclear power plants that are that don't have the kinds of safety concerns that a Vermont Yankee, which was an old leaking plant that we all should have been a little bit worried about. But the likelihood of nuclear power coming back, given just the public concern about it, and when you think of things like the plant in Japan, for example, that leaked and the damage that was caused, you're not going to see nuclear power coming back, at least in anywhere in the near term. It's not going to happen.
And it was what, 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt?
It was low.
Yeah, very low. And then what do you pay per kilowatt for these other newfangled things?
For all of the various and sundry subsidies that we have, sometimes the price can get very high. And that is a concern, because we're subsidizing inefficient technologies, and some folks are profiting on them significantly.
And my understanding is that these power companies are being forced to purchase the electric power
Correct.
at higher
That's absolutely correct.
costs so that they have to raise the price for the homeowner.
That's absolutely correct.
This is all upside down as far as I'm concerned. I just want them to leave me alone. Get out of my car.
Well, again, I guess you can put your My Power plant in your backyard and
No.
and generate your own electricity. But as a practical matter, some of these things that we're doing in terms of subsidies for renewable power, I think do raise serious questions about equity and about what we're doing and why we're doing it. In terms of, it's a cost-benefit analysis. But I think it's clear if you look at the votes coming out of the Vermont legislature that those things are probably not going to go away in the near term unless we have some significant changes in who we elect to the legislature.
I agree.
Because people can complain about all these things, but if you continue to elect people who vote for them, you're going to continue to have them.
Amen. That's good old basic common sense, right?
Yep.
Before you, and I've said this many times as well, and that is, before you vote for someone, you don't tell them what you want. You ask them where they stand on a given issue and how they would handle it. Or how they would vote.
And I think though, also, the voters have to recognize that it's rare they're going to get somebody they agree with 100% of the time.
True.
It's, that's that old saying, was it Ronald Reagan, that if you agree 80% of the time, you're probably doing okay?
Yeah. That's true. I mean, but on the things that are most important to you, if you speak with people who are running for office and ask them, where do you stand on this? How would you vote to handle this? Then hold their feet to the fire.
But one of the things, though, that I think voters should do to the extent that they can is ask candidates what do they think about an issue or where they stand on it. But then ask the next question, why?
Yes.
The why is important because sometimes, when you listen to a candidate and they say why, they're going to do something that you thought you didn't like. If you listen to the answer's a good answer, you might change your mind.
That's true.
That's what's called being an informed voter.
That is true. I agree with that. Okay, let's see. How about another thing that's very concerning, annoying to me is all of these committees and councils that are being created. Why isn't the legislature making these decisions? They're elected to do this job, and now the citizens are having to pay people who are not elected to come up with rationale for this, that, or the other thing that the voters may like or not like, or might cost the people more money or whatever. But this state is not flush with money, okay? And so those that are elected and those who are working in state government need to be very sensitive when they make their decisions to what it's costing the people and how many people are being driven out. The cost of living in this state's gone up considerably.
Yeah.
And it's because government is trying to control education, healthcare. I want to get into healthcare too. Electricity. Leave us alone. Let us make our choices.
Okay.
This is very costly, and it's most of all controlling. It's not freedom.
Well, we
choose.
always have had in Vermont, boards and commissions that do various things that involve detail that is beyond the scope of the detail that the legislature, given the time that it's here and its expertise, can do. We've had a Public Utilities Commission, for example. It's a board. We've had a Natural Resources Board. We've had regional planning commissions. We've had commissions that deal with things.
Those are local, though, aren't they?
Well, they're local, but they're part of this. They're part of state government. It depends on where you put them. in the chain of command, but they are boards and commissions that do things that relate to government. And so we've continued to have them. We had up until recently a state board of education as well as local school boards. As a classic example. We did limit the scope of the State Board of Education in 2 steps, which I think was a very positive thing to do, because we had a whole bunch of unelected people who were making some really significant decisions regarding the education of our kids that I don't think was always in the best interest of the students or of our schools. We moved a number of years ago to say, hey, that's why we're going to create an agency of education and put that agency of education, its head, as a secretary reporting to the governor, because that way we had somebody accountable. If we didn't like what that person was doing, the governor could fire him, and if we didn't like what the governor was doing about it, we could fire the governor. But the problem that you have with some of these boards and commissions is you have people who are unelected who get appointed for 4-year and 6-year terms, and there's no effective way to get rid of them. And that's a problem.
Yes, it is. And the cost of it, it's one more thing that the people have to pay for.
Well, it's not so much the cost of the board itself, because these people typically get peanuts. You know, they get $50 a day for their service. The problem is the cost that they generate because of the work that they do. And in some cases, the staff necessary to support them. That's where the cost is. And the cost, obviously, is depending upon what they do, the cost that winds up getting imposed down the line on Vermonters who ultimately have to pay for what the commission has in effect determined.
Well, as far as the, let me see, which one is it? I believe it's the Global Warming Solutions Act, 23-member Climate Council.
Yep.
Excuse me. These, from what I have read,
and by the way, I did not vote in favor of that.
I'm sure you didn't.
For the record.
I trust that you didn't. But there are too many people, from what I have read, who have conflicts of interest,
Yeah, that's a concern.
sit on that council.
That is a concern.
And that's why I guess I'm not a big fan of these types of things, because the people who want to serve on these committees and councils have a vested interest.
Yeah, to one extent or another, this is a potential concern, and it's a concern always in a small state, and really just generally when you think about boards and commissions, you know, it's very hard to find someone who is entirely independent, who doesn't have a position one way or the other.
That's true.
On the issues that the commission, because that's what makes them serve, is because they do have an interest in the subject matter that this commission oversees. The key is to ensure, I think, that you have enough of a balance serving on those so that you have a variety of interests represented. And ideally, in structuring these things, you also have an escape valve in that somebody is responsible, and in this case, it's likely the governor, to make changes if necessary. Now, that's an imperfect solution, admittedly, because that then depends on who's the governor and whether or not you agree with his or her position. But at least it gives you some sort of a safety valve, and you clearly have to define better what the commission is empowered to do, and in often cases ensure that you have a safety valve too. That safety valve may be the courts, that someone can sue and go to the courts if the commission goes beyond the scope of what it's supposed to do or acts improperly or unfairly, or a governor who can replace them.
Yeah, you make some good points, Randy. Nothing's ever perfect, but there has to be some wisdom in determining, evaluating the people. You can never know 100% what's going through somebody's head and where they stand, unless you know that they're tightly involved with a given entity. But I would like to get back for a minute to I guess it would be, I don't know, TCI maybe? No, that's transportation. Maybe the Global Warming Solutions Act. Anyway, my concern has to do with the aspect of this that those in control want to, again, tax the citizens and contractors, and they want to force.
You're talking about a carbon tax?
I'm talking about forcing people or businesses to repair their buildings. And they want the taxpayers, by repair, they're using the word repair, but really what it means is incorporate into the homes or the businesses environmentally friendly, according to those in charge, mechanics or whatever, you're putting into your home, whether it's your heating system or whatever it might be.
That's something that's non-polluting, or it's environmentally sound, that doesn't use an excess amount of energy, et cetera, et cetera. And I frankly think that some of what we're doing there is an overreach. Let's talk about affordable housing, for example, because that's a context that you could put it in.
Okay.
We have in Vermont a tremendous shortage of housing.
I keep hearing that.
We do, and it's
for whom?
Particularly,
who doesn't have housing?
It's for a variety of people. It ranges from people at the low end of the scale to even people who want to buy pretty decent housing. The amount of housing that we have available and for sale is limited. And as we try to get more people into Vermont to work, as we try to attract people from out of state to come here to take jobs, even to remote jobs that are remote, where they do work here in Vermont, although their employer may be in New York or Boston or someplace else. That's an ideal employee for us. But it is particularly hard to do because there isn't the variety of housing that's available.
Well,
and one of the things that we're also finding is, as we talk about people at the lower end of the scale, people who don't have good housing, finding affordable housing, affordable housing has become an oxymoron. I looked the other day at a program that some of our three-letter housing organizations were sponsoring down in Springfield. And it was at something like 20 units. And the cost of those units, and this is like, 1 and 2 bedroom units, was $400,000 a piece. That's not affordable housing.
No.
But it was produced partially by public funds, leveraged with private funds, to be affordable housing. I looked at another place in Bellows Falls, in which they took a large, older building and converted it into apartments. Most of them were studio and some one bedroom. And those were about $330,000 apiece.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Were all of these, what's the word I want, environmental necessities, so to speak, were they required?
Yes.
Yeah, see, they had to put in all of these green.
And that's one of my concerns.
That's the cost.
What we're often doing is we're sacrificing the good for the perfect. Now, the rationale that many folks are using by saying, well, we want to put, the best weatherproofing, we want to put the most efficient fuel systems in, we want to put the highest quality windows so that there is no air escaping and so on. And their argument is twofold. One, by doing it this way and doing it well means you have a lower maintenance cost later on. And two, you have a lower cost of heating and cooling if necessary, because these are built well so that they don't lose the heat that you burn up for a building that has air running through it, like my house.
And what is the source of the electricity and the heat?
Well, the source of the electricity does vary, but as a general rule, in some cases it ranges from geothermal. It ranges to, there is some electric, not so much pure electric. They're not doing pure electric heat, but in some cases it is using alternative energy to the extent that they can find it. I haven't seen any that uses conventional oil right now, although I can't swear to there are none. But there are a variety of heating sources, and they do try to to be, quote, environmentally friendly as to the heating source of these buildings. Some are natural gas.
So when you say $400,000 for a unit, is that a complete home?
No,
or
it's
is
an
that
apartment.
An apartment? Okay.
Apartment condo.
Who of these homeless or, folks who don't have homes, who can afford $400?
Well, that's the problem, is they can't afford it. And so what they do is they are being subsidized partially through taxes and partially through these private providers. And that's the whole issue of the affordable housing stuff through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. People pay something like 30% of their annual earnings is what, or their monthly earnings is the monthly cost of living there. And it may be not sufficient to cover the true cost, and that balance is being subsidized through public funding.
Let me ask you this, and I don't know if you would have an answer, but you often do. Suppose that these units, apartments, were built without all of this new heating and special windows and special fuel and all the rest of it. What if they were just built traditionally? What would they cost?
Well, they would cost less. I won't give you a number off the top of my head, but they would certainly cost less. One of the things that you see right now today, you can see what a home, like I looked at some homes here in St. Albans that were built by a builder here in the private sector who had was not getting any government funding, and he was able to build a small 3-bedroom home in a newer subdivision here in St. Albans and sell it. So his profit was in there for $250,000. And
I bet it didn't have all of those green energy.
It probably didn't, but
Nope.
it was a single-family home, and it was on a small plot of land, and it was in a community.
Well-
and it had, water and sewer and the kinds of things that you would expect to have in a development.
What the people who are pushing for all of these so-called environmental solutions, do they realize that Vermont has a high proportion of senior citizens who perhaps some are well off, but others are just living month to month?
Sure.
And maybe some of them need a place, but why make it so expensive if people can't afford it? And then put an additional tax burden on the rest of the working people and retired people.
Yeah, it's an issue that we confront every day when we're on these committees talking about how we solve this problem. Now, we are moving, and one of the things I think is positive is looking at older housing stock. In Vermont, we have amongst the oldest housing stock in the nation, and one of the real questions is, why not rehabilitate many of those older homes to make them more livable and to make them,
Environmentally.
make them so that they fit better into the community, so that the communities don't deteriorate with homes that are deteriorating. And so we have done a program this year, and we will do more as we go forward, to subsidize the renovation of houses that are already existing, and there's been some work done on that. In many cases, that can be done less expensively, but the problem, again, is some of the rules and regulations that they operate under require this Cadillac treatment for environmental protection of these homes, so that they aren't so that they are fully weatherized, so that they do have a heating system that's efficient, and so on. And that, yes, it does have an effect on the operating cost overall. And when you start looking at cost, you really do have to look at both operating cost as well as the cost of purchase. But we need to get a balance, and we need to figure out how to make affordable housing more affordable than it is right now. And there we have to look at the private sector, because what we're doing using these public providers is there is not the emphasis on doing things closely to the dollar as there would be in a private sector transaction. The incentive is not there, and that's, I think, one of the critical problems that we're facing.
I see. Well, you and I'm sure you know that in St. Albans this past year, there were a number of new apartments a whole complex right on Main Street and the road by the library. Now, how many of those do you know have been rented out?
I don't know offhand, but I do know that some of that is subsidized housing. That
is.
Again was provided
And
through
who's
the Vermont
subsidizing
Housing and
it,
Conservation Board. Well, yes. I mean, we take all your taxes for that purpose. You know, here's Linda coming, so let's get some more taxes from her to pay for all this stuff.
Jeez. What am I not paying for? What are the rest of us not paying for? Oh, we have a caller.
Okay.
Caller, welcome to the program. What's on your mind? Whoops.
How many homeless people are in Vermont?
Oh,
And you wouldn't want to be a homeless person in Vermont at that temperature.
I did know that number. And I know that number in particular because that was one of the things that I wanted to say 1,900, but I may be entirely wrong. But I know one thing that we did do that I think we probably ought to be proud of is we didn't lose any homeless people to COVID. And we got every homeless person housed in other than congregate housing at the height of the COVID crisis. And Vermont is probably the only place in the country that did that. And that, I think, you know, was a chore, and it was work. It was costly, but it was important.
Hello? Oh, did he say goodbye?
No.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, well, I know we have a fair number in Franklin County.
Yes, we do.
Of homeless people. I don't know who these people are. I don't know if they have families who live here, but they don't get along. I don't know if they're...
Well, there's as many causes as there are stories as there are individuals, and every one of them is different.
Are they Americans?
Yes, by and large they are. I'm not aware that there's any large foreign or illegal immigrant or immigrant populations who are part of the homeless group that we have in Vermont. I'm not aware of that.
Yes. Do you have another question?
Where do the homeless people stay?
That's a good question.
Well, there are a variety of homeless shelters in Vermont, including a couple here in St. Albans, but in many cases, we've moved to do things like take motels, particularly motels that have been empty, as there were a number empty and abandoned, and refurbish them at least minimally so that homeless people would not be in a congregate shelter. By a congregate shelter, I mean in barracks or stacked all together in a single room, because that's how you spread COVID.
So
I'm thinking I wouldn't want to be a homeless person in Vermont because of the temperature, but it's...
Yeah, absolutely. And we started dealing with this, of course, when at the beginning of the crisis, when it was getting warm outside, and you know, as we were dealing with this in April and May, to ensure that we didn't have a problem when it got to be October, November, and December, and I think we did a pretty good job of it.
Okay, because I'm sitting here at 60 degrees in South Carolina, and it's easier to be homeless here than it would be in Vermont, I would think.
Yeah.
And I have to say, this is my cousin Tom.
Okay.
We were talking earlier, and he was asking me about, you know, watching the show and so forth, and I said, well, you can always call in, and he did.
Good.
So, Tommy, thank you very much. I'll talk with you soon.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
hon. Yeah, he's such a nice guy. Oh, my gosh. On another topic.
Yes.
Here we go. I have topics all over the,
Okay.
all over the desk. $15 minimum wage. Now, let me say this. I'm a big proponent of government doing only a certain number of things and then letting private enterprise run their businesses, let people make their individual choices without being forced into this or that the government wants you to do. Okay? I think that It's between an employer and an employee, what the employer can afford to pay, what the employee is worth as a worker. I mean, if you want to get the best hourly wage from your employer, you better be the first one showing up in the morning, the hardest worker the whole time you're there, and even make suggestions to your employer about things that you see that might be enhanced or improved. Just be a loyal, hardworking person, and then you can get paid as much as you and your employer agree to. But for the government to tell a private business owner what they have to pay an employee, are you kidding me? That's nonsense.
Well, of course, we've had minimum wage laws for as long as I can remember. My first job as a minimum wage employee, I remember to this day, and I earned a whopping $1 an hour because that was the minimum wage at that time.
Yeah, I was there too.
And to me, it was more money than I had before.
Even as a nurse in Vermont, let's see, what years was that? In the 60s?
Mm-hmm.
I made $8 an hour.
Boy, you were doing well.
Working in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yep. But everything's relative. You could have you and I could be working, doing the same work for the same employer, and you may be a stellar, hardworking employee, and I do the bare minimum. Do you think we should get paid the same? How long are you going to stay there and put up with that?
Well, part of it depends on how the economy is doing. And if you have an economy in which there are lots of jobs and there are lots of demands for you and your service, you can do that. And right now,
you can leave.
Well, that's it. You can leave and you can go get another better job in a good economy. Now, our economy right now is surprisingly good as far as employment is concerned if you look at the numbers. We had, before the pandemic, we were a little over 2% in terms of unemployment. Our unemployment rate now is a little over 3%. We're the first or second lowest in the nation as far as unemployment. But those statistics, like all numbers, can sometimes be misleading because our total workforce is continuing to shrink, which means that people who are unemployed, who are not looking for work, or who've left the workforce because they can't find anything, don't appear as unemployed. And I suspect our numbers there are higher than they would appear on the surface because we still have people, you know, who can't find a job and who can't find a job that pays them enough to be able to live. And that's still a problem. We've got to improve the quality of the jobs we have in Vermont, not just the number of jobs that we have in Vermont.
Okay, that's good. And the other thing we have to improve, Randy, in my not so humble opinion, is that we need to make sure that our young people are because we're paying for the schools, we can ask this or hope for it, but we can't tell parents what they have to do in raising their children with work ethic and personal responsibility. I learned all that at home from the time I was this high, okay? And forgive me, folks, I said this on the show before, but my mom said to me, I don't know how old I was at the time, Linda, she was tough. She was loving, but she was tough. She said, don't you ever expect anybody to give you anything. If you want something, you expect to work for it and earn it, period. And that is how I've lived my life through thick and thin, hard times. I knew it was up to me.
Yep.
And that's the best gift I was ever given. That sense that I can do it. And that's what we need to inculcate into our children. That sense of capability and achievement, work ethic, and so forth, and rewards for what you do, you know, how hard you work.
Well, our job also is to create opportunity. That's one of the major tasks that those of us in in the legislature and elsewhere can do is create opportunities, create an economic environment in which people can succeed, in which there are jobs, in which there are opportunities, in which there are ways and places. And we do this with the private sector, not solely, this is not solely what government does, but this is what leaders do.
Yes, we need people who are independent and capable, hardworking people to even start businesses.
Well, you need also to create an environment in which businesses can succeed.
And what would that be?
Well, an environment that believes in the free market, hopefully has a tax policy that makes sense, in which you are incented to actually, businesses are incented to come here, stay here, grow here, and prosper here. Those are among the things that we can and should be concentrating on.
Yes, and it shouldn't even cost money really for the taxpayers to have to do that if you have the right environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, an environment, among other things, that says to businesses, we want you to come to Vermont because this is a place where you can grow and prosper. We want employees to come here.
And we've
been particularly it's worked particularly well where we've had things like these remote worker programs in which we advertise and try to get people to move to Vermont. And those have been remarkably successful.
Are they staying?
So far, so good. The initial data, we've only been doing this really effectively probably for about 2 years, but what we're seeing is people are staying and we're profiting from it. That's what's really important, is for the money that we put in, we're getting it back in the first year.
I have a question about that, and that's all good. Now, if I were to come from another state, I get the $10,000.
Well, it's less than that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the average that we spent on remote workers, for example, was about $3,800.
Okay, but I'm taking a housing unit, and
paying for it, hopefully.
Hopefully, and so I'm working for a company back in North Carolina, and I'm getting paid by them. Am I paying income taxes here?
Yes.
Even though you don't work for a company?
Yes.
Here, really?
Yeah, you're paying taxes here because that's where you live and that's where you file your income tax.
Okay.
So you're getting taxes. Presumably you're paying property taxes. Now, some would argue, well, somebody paid property taxes on the house before. Well, either they're living in a truck or they're paying taxes someplace else, hopefully still here in Vermont. But there's also the economic activity of the spending that they do in the community. That's helping everybody.
Well, yes, if they're buying food
Correct,
and
yeah.
gasoline
Exactly.
and so forth.
Yep.
Yeah, I get that,
Yep.
yeah. Well, it was
And thus far, the numbers look good in that we are attracting people at reasonably, we have a floor in terms of the minimum amount that they have to earn in order to qualify. So that we're not bringing people in who are working at minimum wage and then paying them to move here. We're not doing that by any means.
Of course, we don't really know how much they earn, do we?
Yes, we do.
You do?
Oh,
You
yeah,
see their
that's part of the
The
program.
deal?
Yeah, that's part of the deal.
Okay. All right, is there a topic that you would like,
The only thing that I would touch on right now is broadband.
Oh, yes.
Broadband is probably one of the most important things that we can do.
Amen.
In Vermont, we are beginning to have this separation between the urban and the rural. And we want to make sure that rural Vermont keeps pace. And connectivity and broadband, particularly, this is something that we learned more than anything else from COVID, is how important it is to have broadband so that you can work remotely, so that you can do telemedicine and contact your doctor and be
connected.
treated and be connected. And indeed, when necessary, that you can do some things in education remotely. All of those things, broadband is important. And some have argued that, if you take a look at your house, add $5,000 to the value of your house if you've got high-speed broadband, right off the bat. So it is an absolute winner, and it's critical when we look at our smaller communities and our more rural areas. If they want to keep pace with what's happening in the world, you're going to need broadband to do it. And one of my major goals in the legislature is to ensure that we do have broadband throughout Vermont. We passed some legislation in the last session that allowed for the creation of these communications union districts, CUDs.
Yes, yeah.
And we have a number of them, including one that started up, actually two that started up that affect Franklin County. One, the northern regions that will include from Enosburg over across the top of the state over to Alberg. And then another that will go down into southern Franklin County and Lamoille.
That's wonderful, and that's, we have a caller, but I just want to say, Randy, I'm glad you're supporting that because that has an effect on everybody.
It absolutely does.
So thank you. Caller, welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes?
Oh, Mr. Brock, it's so good to see you. And I just want to thank you for all the work you've put in the legislature, and all the thoughtfulness that you've brought to, especially issues of affordable housing, big issue, and remote work and affordability. I just want to thank you for all that.
Well, thank you very much.
I also want to thank you, Mr. Brock, for your action in the state legislature, making the motion to condemn Donald Trump and the violence that he incited on January 6th. It means a lot to us out here and here in Franklin County. And what you did, I just think it's incredibly brave and not without difficulty, I'm sure.
Well, thank you.
And even more than that, I just want to speak to the fact that you're appearing on a show hosted by someone who just 2 weeks ago, when they were asked, failed to condemn Donald Trump, as you did, and even went so far to insinuate that what happened on the 6th was not only patriotic, but it was something that was a justified response to the results of the last election. And this is all on tape. You can watch it yourself.
That is not what I said.
This is a show that just this month proudly gave a platform to wild conspiracies about election fraud this last election. It's a show that hosted Ron Lawrence, chair of the Essex GOP, that organized a COVID bus trip to the insurrection, bringing Vermonters to our capital, and claims that nothing wrong happened on that day that resulted in white supremacist riots and looting, the desecration of our nation's capital, the deaths of 5 people, including Capitol Police. Recent guests have spoken highly of conspiracy theories of QAnon and the Save the Children movement. These are folks who believe that Democrats are all-powerful Jewish pedophiles who are worthy of extrajudicial execution, and I could go on. But the point is,
Please don't.
Linda has been delighted to give a platform to racist, anti-Semitic, and quite frankly, anti-democratic views for years, from the likes of the Bilodeaus, Durfees, Shepherds, Bilinskis, Ropers, Fitzgeralds, and more. And my question to you is this: how do you feel appearing on a show like that? Will you be back? And if you're trying to repair the country, as we all want to heal it, to unite it, should Vermont Republicans and Franklin County Republicans be appearing on a show that regularly, habitually, and gleefully spreads hate and lies intended to divide? This is a really important question. I thank you so much, Mr. Brock, for your bravery, for your thoughtfulness, and your hard work, and all of that to come in this year and the next. I thank you so much, but I believe that this question deserves answering. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, I can't speak for anybody other than myself who's been on Linda's show. Linda is someone that I have known for many years, and we don't always agree on everything,
No.
but we agree to not disagree disagreeably. And I think that's important. And when you talk about bringing this country together, we've got to talk, regardless of what our political philosophy and our political beliefs are, we've got to open a line of communication and be able to talk with each other and to be able to talk with each other without rancor. We may not disagree, we may not agree on everything. That goes without saying. But you don't have to agree with your neighbor, but you do hopefully have to talk to him or her.
We have another caller. Caller, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Linda, how you doing?
Good.
Hey, Linda, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
You know, your last caller just called people racist and everything else on your show because they have beliefs that maybe disagree with his. I would say to that last caller that just made that call, and would say that I'd like to ask him personally, the lady in Minnesota who had her cupcake business destroyed by Antifa and Black Lives Matter. He sits there and says that people like us are the ones who are racist and the ones that are causing the trouble. I would just say to him, tell me what that lady did in Minnesota that made cupcakes, that deserved to have her business destroyed. And I would also say that I am a proud supporter of Donald Trump. And I would like Mr. Brock to explain to me, out of all the policies that Trump did in his 4 years as president, tell me the one policy that he did that was terrible. Because I know Joe Biden just did an executive order to did away with the people that were over 65 that could get insulin for $35 a month. Tell me why somebody would do away with that policy. Tell me why. And if you want to start a recession in this country, raise the price of fuel. Tell me why the first day in office you would sign an executive order to eliminate the not the Alaskan pipeline, but the Keystone pipeline that eliminated jobs in a pandemic. Answer that to me, Mr. Brock, and answer to me the policies that you can tell me that Donald Trump did that were bad. Peace in the Middle East. I can sit here and name hundreds of them. Not one thing did that man do bad. But yet you have a caller call in and tell us we're racist. I'm nothing but a racist. And I've been on your show, and I can tell you, I am not a racist, and I love everybody. And I'm going to tell you right now, tell me again what the lady in Minnesota did to have her business destroyed, and tell me why the caller does not condemn that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know why he's upset. I don't want you to be put on the spot.
I'm a politician. I love to be put on the spot.
Well,
I mean, that's what we do. And, you know, the point, I think, of all of this is we could get into an endless argument between you and the caller before you, who are obviously at different points on the political spectrum. I'm not here to defend Donald Trump. I'm not here to defend Joe Biden. I represent Vermont in the Vermont State Senate, and that's where my focus is, and that's where my concern is, and that's where my debate is. Period.
And I would like to say to the previous speaker prior to this last one, I did not say what you are accusing me of saying, except that I feel that Donald Trump and the Republicans who were there in Washington, D.C. to honor him and what he said to go peacefully to the Capitol. I believe the man who used to be an officer of some sort, who saw a truckload of men get off a bus in that area and join the Republicans, I believe they're the ones who went to cause the problems at the Capitol. But nobody people who don't like Donald Trump want to make him accountable for that. And there's been a lot of that going on, people doing things and then trying to make it look like it was Donald Trump's fault. And I think that's a sad way to handle things. As the previous caller said, the president rebuilt our military. He just did so many phenomenal things for this country, and he loves the United States of America and the American people. And I love this man over here. I think he's great. We don't always agree, as he said, on everything, but we're respectful of one another, and we don't need to put one another down to make ourselves look good, okay? So there.
Okay.
I had no idea that this has never happened before.
No, it's not unusual, and I mean it points to how badly divided we are as a country, and that's unfortunate.
Divided we fall.
And we do find that we do have the extremes who are the ones who are the angriest and who have the loudest voices. And that, again, is a sad thing and a sad
Yes.
day for our country.
It definitely is. Well, Randy, we're down to the last 25 seconds. Time flies when you're having fun.
It does indeed.
Yes, I mean, there are a lot more topics for another day if you're so inclined, but I want to thank you so much for all that you do, for who you are, and for serving our state so honorably, and thank you for joining me on the program.
Well, thank you very much. Enjoyed being here.
Thank you. Good night, folks.